Hello, and welcome to the Yogeez Podcast. And today is one of our special episodes, one that we do every 10 episodes, where we speak to the team and we ask them the very simple question: what's your problem, mate? So today we've got Gabes. Hello, Gabes.
Yes, geezers, how are you?
Good. And we've got Ollie.
Hello, hello. Good.
Doing that's a yogi's triangle sign soon to come. And yes, we will be asking each other the question, and we will just talk about what's on our mind, and then maybe ask a question at the end of each person's share. So I think we can jump straight into it. Two of you ready?
I'm
Ready.
ready.
Okay, brilliant. Let's start with Gabe's. That wasn't pre-planned. Gabe's, what's your problem, mate?
Thank you, Nick. Thanks for the intro. Something that that's been weighing on me over the past couple of weeks, I think. Um, I'll give you the headline and then I'll explain it, try and explain it a bit better. But I think I'm worried that I am currently so invested in doing rather than being. And I know that sounds a little bit woo woo. What I mean by that, though, is I think at my age and stage, in my mid 20s, and myself and all the people around me are sort of getting better jobs and sort of moving up. The tendency, or my tendency, is to spend my entire time focusing on what I'm doing, what the next goal is, what the next target is, what the next objective is. And in doing so, there's nothing wrong with that. But in doing so, I've noticed that I've spent much less time just being. And you can call that being in the present. That's one thing. But I don't just mean about being in the present. I mean just being here now. And I think that I'm so geared towards thinking about the next step and the future that I forget what I've got right now, what I have around me, if you see what I mean. And so I think there's a few things I've been thinking about this, and there's a couple of things that are the problem or part of the problem. I think one is, and this isn't a secondary problem, but is addiction to phones. My addiction to my phone, I should say. That's something that I'm really struggling with at the moment. And at the end of each day, I see my screen time, and it's however many hours. And I every day I think, what if I'd spent even 1 hour less not on my phone? What could I have done, or what could I have been? I could have been more rather than just doing stuff. um that's one thing. I think another thing is, like I mentioned, about jobs and stuff, and like I said, in my social circles of my group, the focus very much at the moment is on career and progression, and I love that. I think it inspires all of us to be better and get better. But for me, I noticed that the side effect of that is not appreciating right here, right now, not taking time to notice what I do have. And I've spoken about this before on the channel about gratitude, and I'm so aware of the importance of gratitude, but I don't practice what I preach, so to speak. At the moment, I'm really struggling. I think I'm so switched into this like straight line analytical vision of life, of like step forward, step forward, step forward. The analogy I keep thinking of is, I feel like I'm in a little bit like I'm in the ocean, and there's just waves constantly crashing over me, and every so often I'm getting my head up for air, and then another wave crashes, and I'm just trying to get further and further out, when I think I could benefit a little bit from just treading water a little bit and just swimming, staying where I am, and just accepting what's around me. Um, so yeah, that's the kind of issue I've been having, is feeling as though I'm existing in a sense of doing rather than being. And I hope that this conversation and me saying this is going to act as a signifier for me to change that a little bit, and to be a bit more of a beer rather than a doer.
Thanks for
Cool.
sharing.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you for listening.
And I
Cool.
think, go on, Ollie. Did you have a question for Gabe's?
I just wanted to say you're not alone, to be honest. I think that this is a problem that a lot of people deal with on a day to day. You get caught up in that grind. What I wanted to ask is, for anyone that's listening, they might be wondering, have you found a resolution or something that helps kind of get you out of this rut? Yeah.
So do you know what? I think this is probably not the right way of saying it. The easy answer or the generic answer is something like meditation, right? And I do meditate. That's like the kind of easy thing to say. I think I'll just meditate, and then like that gives you 15 minutes where you're being rather than doing. And it's true, but I think also the reality is that it's really hard to have a consistent practice of that. And so, do I really, in truth, when I meditate, maybe 4 times a week, 5 times a week, like 6 times on a really good week, do I really finish that meditation and feel like, wow, I'm like really kind of out of this state of doing? No, I don't. And so for me personally, and again, this is people will say the same applies to this, but for me, it's about exercise. That's something that really helps me get out of that mindset of like do. I know that if I can go to the gym and I put music on, and you don't need to spend an hour, 2 hours in there. I spend 30 minutes, but I work hard for 30 minutes. In those 30 minutes, I'm just focused on that right there. And I've got into this practice. Sorry, this is a bit of a long-winded answer, but I've got into this practice now at the gym actually of this sounds a bit weird. At the end of every session, no matter if it was intense or not, I try and finish on like a high intensity movement. So my heart rate is elevated. And then at the end, I finish and I just collapse on the floor and I just lie on my back for like a minute. Almost like you could say in yoga, I've forgotten what it's called now.
Shavasana.
Almost like a Shavasana, but like a gym-related Shavasana. And it really has done something for me of this, like, it gives you this moment of like, I'm here.
Do you know what Shavasana translates as?
What?
Take a guess.
I don't know.
Stillness.
Like the corpse pose, so essentially the dead pose, the stillness pose.
Yeah, makes sense.
Can I have a quick follow-up question to what you just said?
Yeah.
Like a really quick one. Have you been going to the gym recently?
Yeah.
You have? Because if this is a problem that you've been having recently, I would have assumed that maybe that. So for me, if I get into that point where I'm just like, God, like, things aren't going the right way, it's because I haven't been keeping consistent with the things that I know help.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think for me, it's actually for the past period of time, it's been the one thing that I'm consistent with. I would say that like that's sort of like a non-negotiable for me, and it does help. Clearly, it's not the kind of be all and end all of getting out of this sense of doing, but it's definitely the one consistent thing for me, and it has genuinely it has an effect for sure.
And just one last question on your problem. When you do instead of be, what do you think that you're missing out on?
That's such a good question. I think it might be too broad of an answer to say just life. Like just life. You're missing out on what is happening right in front of you. Like everything that's going on around, not everything that's going on around me, but stuff that's happening around me. My friends doing really good. One of my best friends just got a job promotion. I mean, a new job, I should say, a new job. It's really exciting. And I want to plug into that more than I have. Do you know what I mean? His first day is today. And I feel like I haven't plugged into it enough. And I sort of like, I'm regretting that. And I will still be able to, but in hindsight almost. So I think it's just, I feel like when we're doing rather than being, we can miss the emotional connections that we have with other people.
Yeah, it definitely seems that your focus sometimes is on others rather than yourself as well. from what you just said. Like, you've spoken about a lot of things that are going on, like, externally,
Mm.
and how it's affecting you internally, which is interesting to see how a lot of things that are outside of your control impact how you feel.
Mm.
Um,
Very true.
so I think, yeah, I think what do you think, just to wrap up, would be a few things that you would suggest if someone else is going through this that they can put into practice or change their mindset of? So you've obviously said going to the
Yeah,
gym probably helps,
I
meditation.
think, yeah, going to the meditation, I think writing stuff down has really helped me. I try and keep a daily journal as much as I can. And I say it like that because I, again, don't stick to it every day. Um, but I find getting stuff out of my head and onto paper really helps, even if it's just scribbled stuff at the end of a day. I often do it just before bed, even if that means 1 in the morning when I finish work. I just scribble some stuff down, and I feel like that's helping me to be a try and be a little bit more aware of what's going on for me. But yeah,
Cool.
thank you for listening to my problem, guys. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Um, I think is it now my turn to ask Ollie?
Indeed.
So Ollie, what's your problem, mate?
Thanks for asking, and thanks for sharing as well. Um, so my problem is, I've got a lot of problems, guys. I'm not gonna lie to you. I think everyone does, but recently, I have been making a lot of changes in life, and my problem has become learning to be alone. So I've spent my life in relationships, surrounded by people. I've got two siblings and my parents that I've kind of grew up living with, so I was in a family of five. And yeah, recently I've just bought my own place. I live there on my own, and it's the first time I've lived on my own actually. So it was a kind of a big change for me. But I've gone, my entire life either in relationships or surrounded by people, and it's become my norm. So there's this huge change that's happened recently, which is when I realized I had been basically going from relationship to relationship in this kind of just almost like a necessity. It was just like, this is what happens. Like, you go out of a relationship, it didn't work out, you try and find another one. And I wasn't thinking about it. So there's some relation to what you were saying, Gabes, which is that I just wasn't really present. I was just kind of getting on with it. I was just wasn't really paying attention to what I was doing. And so I've been single for about a year now, and it's the longest I've ever been single for, and it's also the longest I've ever lived on my alone on my own for. And it's actually a massive change. Like, it's really hard to not try and actively search for someone else to like have in my life. And I've been kind of struggling to accept that it's okay to do things on my own, to live alone, to like even little things like going to the supermarket. It's so much more enjoyable, or it was so much more enjoyable to do that with somebody else. And it's the little kind of day-to-day things that I've kind of had to get used to, just ultimately like riding solo, basically. Um, and yeah, it's been a strange kind of transition, and it's something that I've had to adjust to. So I'm quite um, uh, I love being around people. I'm quite a kind of externalized person. I'm not. I have my introverted moments, but I'm definitely an extrovert. Like, when it comes down to heart and stuff, but I've had to train myself to be an introvert, to actually realize that I was focusing on absolutely everything around me rather than focusing on myself. And it's taken me, I'm 32 now, and it's taken me literally probably the last like 15 years of being in these really shitty relationships to actually realize that they were shitty, and actually to realize that I don't need to be in a relationship all the time to make myself happy or feel fulfilled and stuff, and I can actually go for walks on my own. I can actually exist and grow a business on my own. I can do all these things that I wouldn't have been able to do on my own before. And I think that when I looked at it in other people, there's so many other people in the world that are completely reliant on other people. And you should never rely on someone that isn't yourself, because in my opinion, because you don't know. I mean, there's just nothing, you can't be sure of what all of the external factors are going to bring to your life. So basically, yeah, my focus recently has been trying to kind of trust myself and be okay with that. And yeah, I'm still working on it, and it probably will be something that I'm going to be working on for a while now. So yeah, that's my problem, guys.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
I've got a couple of question on that. Have you found in this like period of being single that you've got to know yourself better? Do you feel like you've gained a better understanding of yourself since being alone, or not really?
100%. It's like one of the biggest things that I've gained, because I always used to say, "Oh, I know my girlfriend really well," or "I've learned so much about my girlfriend," and then I was like, "That's great, but I've not learned anything about myself, because my focus has always been on the other person." And yeah, it's also changed how I look at relationships now. Like, I would say that I actually have standards now. Like, I actually have things that I look for in somebody, whereas before it would be, it would just happen. I'd just kind of fall into relationships without actually analyzing it and thinking about who they were as a person and who I was as a person, and if we matched, or we had similar values and things like that. Yeah, I've learned a huge amount about myself because I've spent a lot of time on my own. So you start to kind of think about who you are.
Yeah, that was similar to what I was going to ask, but I had another thing that I wanted to know about as well, and that was about, are there times when you feel lonely, or kind of, are there times where, because I've had it where I've spent time on my own, and sometimes I really enjoy it, and sometimes I really yearn for human connection and being around people. And have there been times where you have felt, this is quite a personal question, but where you felt lonely, or how have you managed it, where you felt the need for human connection? Is there another way that you've learned to do it rather than being in a relationship?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely felt lonely, for sure. Like today, to be honest, like my day, because I also work from home. So my day to day is that if I actually want to see another human being, I have to leave the flat and go to the gym, or go buy some groceries, or message a mate and be like, "Do you want to hang out?" Because otherwise, it will literally be like, I wake up, I work out, and I won't see anyone. So there's been times where I felt extremely lonely, and the way I've dealt with it, to be honest, sometimes I haven't. Like, sometimes I've really felt like shit, and I've caved, and I've thought, oh, I'll just jump on Tinder, or I'll message an ex or something. And I've always gotten to the point where I've nearly done that, and then I've stopped myself, because I know that I'm doing it out of just like, it's like a craving, and it's bad for you. And like, the reason why I kind of chose to be alone is so I stop having that craving, because it's so unhealthy to like need somebody and not be okay to just kind of like to deal with it. on your own and be strong within that. So yeah, sometimes I go on walks, or I've also started building healthy relationships with people, and I started to value people in a different way. Like I know I know the people that are good for me now. I used to have a lot of people in my life, and a lot of them were toxic. A lot of them were negative. A lot of them didn't make me feel as good as others. So I think that if I do really get to that point where I think, oh God, like I'm feeling super alone, I'll reach out to someone that I know actually cares about me and values me. But yeah, it's not like I haven't got like a perfect process in place yet. It's definitely still work in progress. But I think there's so many people out there that are also single that are kind of, I think also, especially when you get to like your 30s, it's not the easiest thing to make friends. Like it's not, you don't just meet people, you know, it's like you're not going to uni, unless you work somewhere, but then, you know, they're always work colleagues. So yeah, but you know, I found my people now. I know what I want, and I've figured that out in the past year. It's like I know the kind of people I want to hang out with. I know the kind of people I want in my life, and the type of relationships I want. And they're a lot more like detailed, and they're a lot deeper now. Whereas before it was kind of quite artificial or even superficial, I suppose. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for sharing, Ollie.
Pleasure, guys. Thanks for listening. I suppose it's now time for me to ask Nick. Nick, what's your problem, mate?
Feels good to be asked that, actually. So my problem is about my identity. And as I guess a fairly new dad, my daughter's now 1 year old, I feel that I've lost a lot of the time to do the things that I used to do that made me feel like myself, whether that be hobbies or whether that be time with friends. And because we've been in Lisbon as well, away from mates in London too, I've really, it was interesting, you were talking about it, Ollie, earlier, saying that you really feel that you've known yourself and you've got to know yourself a lot better. I kind of had the opposite, where from being someone who spent a lot of time on his own or traveling the world and spending time with people and then spending more time on my own and then more with people, I kind of had a really good balance, or a balance that worked really well for me. And now as a parent, I'm either working or spending time with the family. And by doing that, and obviously, you know, I don't even need to say it, but there's so many amazing things that come with having a daughter. But one of the things I've definitely lost is that sense of, not lost completely, but I've lost a lot of, is that sense of self and who I am and doing the things that I enjoy doing and looking after myself. A lot of the things we talk about here at Yogeez, I've kind of don't have the time. I've struggled to carve the time out for myself to practice yoga, to exercise, to spend lots of time with friends and all that stuff, and that kind of human connection beyond my family and my kind of small family group. I've had very little of. So for me, I guess if I had to put that problem in a sentence, it would say, I feel that I've lost part of Nick's identity, and that's something that has been quite hard, and how that has manifested is being a bit frustrated and a bit anxious that I'm not doing the things that I want to do. And when I hear, chatting to someone earlier who was, you know, going on holiday for 2 weeks and they're, you know, single and just, you know, enjoying the freedom. And that's when I hear something like that, I'm like, oh yeah, I can't really do that anymore. And that kind of does affect me, and it does kind of hit me a little bit, and just makes me just look at life and think, you know, what can I do to regain that kind of real joy that I got from a lot of things that I used to do? How can I kind of recapture that? And I'm finding that really hard at the moment to do.
Damn, thank you for sharing. That hit me deep, man.
You're welcome.
Thank you. It's literally the opposite of what I just said.
That's why it's quite interesting, isn't it?
It's so interesting, isn't it? how you can struggle even if you're one side of the coin.
It's kind of like my bank of human connection I really get from, daughter and girlfriend, and those relationships are really strong, but it's a lot of the other stuff that made up who I am has kind of been stripped away.
One thing I was going to point out, what I wrote down that I was going to point out, because like on one hand you could say it's like a loss of identity, a loss of the old Nick. I suppose on another hand, and this may just be trying to paint too much of a good picture, it could be, you could call that growth, shedding old skin, and sort of stepping into new skins and new ways of being. I'm not saying that it is growth. I'm saying, I'm asking, do you feel like there's some growth in there? And if so, how do we know the difference between growth and just sort of losing a sense of ourselves? That's a massive question. But what are your thoughts on that?
I think this is very much a transition period, and we're still not settled, which adds to it as well. So we'll still be moving about. We still haven't found a home, which hopefully we will soon. So I think a lot of people, when they have kids, they've planned it. And so they know that their life is kind of taking that new direction. We didn't plan Molly. She was a beautiful surprise. And so I think because we hadn't planned that, it kind of hit me much more full power because I wasn't expecting it. I didn't think these things through. It kind of just happened. And so I would say that there's definitely growth from it, because I do think that when you do go through stuff and it does hit you, you do learn new things. And what we have done is we've worked on a life plan together, me and my girlfriend, where we think about the things that are important to us and what are the actual practical things we need to do to get there. So I guess I've definitely grown and learned a hell of a lot from the experience as well. And there's so much from having a child. A child teaches you more than anything else, at least in my life, has taught me more than anything else. So in that respect, there's definitely been growth from having a child and learning. I guess in a way I've learned what's important and the things that are important to me and that make me happy. So I guess in a way you would say there's definitely been growth, and I feel that I've only been able to talk about it more recently is because I've become aware of it. And I think it's, to your other question, I think it can only become growth when you become aware of it, because then you need to kind of work through something. So I would say when I didn't know what it was, it kind of affected me on a level that I wasn't really sure what was going on, but it still affected me and manifested itself through stress and anxiety. Whilst I think now I'm aware of it and we're kind of making more of a practical plan. So there's definitely been growth from it, and it feels like the green grass is, hopefully we'll get into that green grass soon. But at the same time, there's still days or there's still triggers I get where I do get that, like, like I was saying when someone's going on holiday today, where I'm like, good for them. Like, as someone who used to spend a lot of time traveling around the world, and I got so much joy and I felt so alive being in different cultures and, landing in a different country and all the different smells and senses just being heightened. Like, that's something that made me feel really alive. So the fact I don't do that now, definitely it triggers me when stuff like that happens.
Nick.
Ollie.
Firstly, I hear you. A lot of my friends are going through the same thing. They're young dads and they're stressed and they're not sleeping, and there's so many things that they're learning, and I speak to them because I'm the single friend that, like you said, you're pissed off at that goes traveling and stuff. But I have a best friend. He has 2 kids. And they're absolutely incredible. And he, at the start, he changed a lot, and his lifestyle changed a lot. And it took him a while to, adapt and change, but then he came back to himself. And I measured that by the amount of time we'd spent with each other. So at the start, I'd never see him. And then we gradually started spending more and more time together. And now it's almost like back to normal. So what I wanted to ask you is zoom out a little bit and think about what you are working on now and where you want to be in, say, like 5 years. Do you see yourself back to the position that you're craving now? Do you think this is a short-term kind of change? And I guess also to, speak to all the other young new dads out there, because I'm sure we've got a lot of listeners that are also new dads, just to give them a little bit of hope, because my thinking is that you'll get back to where you want to be. But where do you want to be in 5 years? And do you see it as a kind of a better version of yourself than you are now? Would you different priorities, but also as happy, if not happy?
Yeah, for sure. I struggle to look beyond a year or so in advance, but I think certainly for sure, and what I was saying about those practical steps we've taken in terms of a life plan and figuring out what's important to us, I feel once we have a home and a base, which we haven't had for a few years now, I think that will make a big difference, because I think that gives you the structure you need to be able to do certain things that we know make you happy. So I would say it gets easier as well. I think the first 6 months of a child is probably the hard. Well, I'm only a year in, so maybe there are tougher periods, but I feel that it's definitely easier now. I feel it's a combination of a few things that's kind of led me to here. I definitely have hope that in 6 months I will be a happier Nick, like a more thriving and joyful Nick, who's spending time with friends back in London, doing more of the stuff that he likes to do, because there's more support for our daughter as well. She'll be going to nursery, so I feel it's kind of like we know the practical steps, and I feel like once we've got there and I start to be able to create time to be able to work on myself and the things that I know make me happy, I'm really confident that I'll get there. And I've got, luckily, quite a few mates who are young dads as well, and other friends who are really involved in my daughter's life. So I'm very optimistic that it will be better, and I'll have the time that I need to do the things that I love and make me really happy. So I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty damn hopeful that I'll be there in by the end of this year, in a few months, in answer to your question.
Yeah, I think you will be too.
Thank you, geezers. I think that's it.
Quite a nice
Thank you. Thanks everyone for listening. Hope you enjoyed listening to us share our problems. Thank you, Gabes, and thank you, Ollie, once again for sharing.
Thank you.
I always feel that when we have these chats, they're really good and really interesting, and I kind of wish that we did them more.
Yeah, I would completely.
Because it's kind of what you need to actually make you aware of what's going on when you actually think. Because I'm sure, like we all did, we thought we had a moment to think, okay, what actually am I going to share? And it's that awareness again that I think helps become a catalyst for positive change, or for you to make that step difference, for you to spend less time on your phone or whatever it is.
Yeah, and this is literally the epitome of Yogeez. Like, being able to give people an opportunity to really think about what's going on, what's their problem, and to have people to speak to about it.
Perfect way to end.
And it's so useful.
And on that as well, we've got a lot coming from Yogeez soon that you'll soon start to see. We've got circles with Gabes that we'll be talking about over the next month. And also lots more to come, a new website that will probably be live by the time this podcast is live, which is really exciting. We've got a yoga challenge, 17 days of yoga, 17 minutes a day, and the positive impact that can have on your health and well-being. So lots to come. Check us out at Yogeez on Instagram and yogeezes.com for our beautiful new website and beautiful new visual identity that Ollie here has been working on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gabes.
Thanks
everyone for listening.
Peace.
Thanks, guys.
For now, take it geezy.